Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today's topic is lost video games. Before I start, I just wanted to give credit to Zone Was Here for making this iceberg. Link to the iceberg itself and all the sources used in this video will be down in the description. So this iceberg is slightly different from usual. Instead of being arranged from least to most obscure, it instead goes from most to least evidence of existence, which probably makes no difference since there is likely a correlation between amount of evidence and obscurity. But anyways, let's get straight into Tier 1. A strange entry to start off with, but the $1 million Pyramid was released on March 8th, 2011 for the Nintendo Wii. It was directly based on a long-running game show from the United States called Pyramid, one I am not at all aware of. Contestants are split into teams of 2. Each member is able to give the other hints to answer one of 6 categories. These categories were stacked on top of each other like a pyramid, hence the name. The game wasn't particularly popular and received little press coverage. No surprise really, since it was a quiz show shovelware for the Wii. However, from the few reviews that did exist, many screenshots of the game look different from the final version. In August 2020, more screenshots of this pre-released version were shown online, with a different game logo, similar to the more modern iteration of the game show. This confirms the existence of an earlier version of the game, one that is yet to resurface online. Now this next entry could cover a whole video itself, but I'll try to be brief. Angry Birds is one of the most successful mobile game franchises, and with that level of success came multiple iterations and ports of the game. People told Rovio they liked their silly little bird game, and Rovio has yet to stop pumping them out. Some of these ports were developed for browsers and made in collaboration with certain companies, and when these websites were shut down, the games were unable to be accessed. For example, many Facebook versions of Angry Birds are unavailable to play since they were shut down by Zuck. Other examples of lost Angry Birds games include Angry Birds Flash, Google+, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Angry Birds Skills. Luckily, some of these browser games have been found and preserved, although not in a perfect state. Angry Birds Chrome, Fuji TV, and Telepizza have all been archived, giving hope to McDonald's fans everywhere that they too might get a chance to play Angry Birds McDonald's. Animaniacs Hollywood Hypnotics was a 2D platformer for the Game Boy Advance, developed in 2003 and based on the cartoon of the same name. With a similar plot to an episode of the cartoon, the game was a platformer with point-and-click elements, two game genres that don't really seem to work well together. The game was stylized after Animaniacs games from the SNES Mega Drive era, with the levels being themed after movie locations, Wild West, Gangster, Space Pirate, etc. The game was to be released alongside the GameCube title Animaniacs Hollywood Hijinks. However, both were cancelled when publisher Swing Entertainment was unable to pay their debts. Hollywood Hijinks was purchased by a new publisher and released as Animaniacs The Great Edgar Hunt. However, Hollywood Hypnotics was left with no publisher and has since remained unreleased. Ashes Cricket 2013 is a cricket game where you can relive the English getting humiliated by the Australians at a game the English invented. Released on November 22nd, 2013 on Steam, the game was planned to have 3 console ports for the PS3, Xbox 360, and the Wii U. Upon release, the game was heavily criticised by players and critics for its many bugs, with players being particularly upset that they were tricked into buying a cricket game. 4 days after the release, publisher 505 Games pulled the game from Steam and cancelled all plans for a console port. With the game still unlisted, there is no way to buy a copy of it outside of tracking down unused keys. My sympathy to those 3 people who want to buy a copy. Beavis and Butthead was a cancelled arcade beat-em-up developed in 1996 and based on the cartoon of the same name. A 2-player game, it had the twist of allowing players to work together, or instead fight each other. There are a couple of reasons for the game's cancellation, the first being that developer Atari had been bought by Midway during the development. Midway had cancelled many of Atari's games and projects, and this one was no different. The second reason was that the game just tested poorly and was subsequently never fully finished. The existence of the game has been confirmed by Galloping Ghost Arcade, who in 2016 managed to buy and restore a prototype cabinet. Like a prick, they refused to leak the ROM online. Big Bible Town was an MMO released on November 15th, 2010. It was developed by Third Day Games, creators of other such iconic game series, Bible Champions and Gospel Champions. The game was similar in style to other children's MMOs of the time, such as Club Penguin, with the main goal of teaching biblical values and lessons. Set in the 11th century, the game also included quests players could undertake, winning tokens to buy costumes, buildings, and pets. The game was also planned for an iOS release, which was eventually cancelled. The game was shut down, making it completely lost. Bubsy II was a platformer released in 1994 for the SNES and Mega Drive. Somehow critically praised at the time of release, Bubsy is rightfully recognised in more modern times as a fraud and a freak of nature. The game also received a handheld port for the Game Boy in 1995, however there were also plans to release the game on Sega's handheld console, the Game Gear. This port was seemingly just a coloured version of the Game Boy port. This game was first revealed to the public by Steven78, who posted screenshots of the game online whilst on a cancelled and unreleased game dumping spree. However, the ROM itself was never dumped, making this game still lost. Capcom Fighting All-Stars Code Holder was a cancelled crossover fighting game planned to be released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2 and on arcades. The game features characters from iconic Capcom fighting franchises such as Street Fighter, Final Fight, and Rival Schools, as well as brand new fighters teaming up to save Metro City from a bomb threat. Something I would imagine could be stopped instantly by any one of the characters on the roster for Street Fighter 3 Alpha. The game was a 3D fighter set on a 2D plane, playing similarly to games from the franchises featured on the roster. Originally, Capcom planned to make a sequel to their SNK crossover fighter, but after SNK were unavailable, they decided to make an internal crossover fighter instead. First revealed to the public in September 2002, the game was criticised for its poor 3D models and animation, especially when compared to other fighting game franchises of the time, such as Tekken and Virtua Fighter. After further negative feedback from location tests, the game was cancelled. Cel Damage 2 was a 2003 cancelled sequel to vehicular combat game Cel Damage, planned for release for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. It was going to be similar to the original, with a focus on improving on the original game and fixing the aspects criticised by the public. One of the aspects kept was the cel-shaded art style, since Cel Damage is the best looking game ever made. The game was never officially announced, only mentioned offhand in a development article after the release of Cel Damage. After this, it was never mentioned again. Developer Pseudo Interactive closed in 2008, confirming the game to its fate. With this, concept art was posted online, alongside leaked gameplay. It is theorized the game was cancelled due to EA, the publisher of the original Cel Damage, and their lack of interest in publishing a sequel after the poor sales of the first game. Astérix et la Potion Magique was a side-scrolling action game released in 1986 by Cocktail Vision for the Amstrad CPC, PC-DOS, Thomson MO5, and Thomson TO. Based on the first book of famous French comic series Astérix, the game has players travelling across Europe, collecting ingredients to a strength potion while avoiding boars and Romans. Once all these ingredients are collected, the player then confronts the Romans and saves their partner, Panoramix. The game was poorly received, most critics noting its frustrating controls and mechanics, with the bizarre choice of including a time limit which decreases whenever an enemy is defeated. There is a record of a DOS port of the game existing, but no copy ever resurfacing. This piece of information provided by someone who can't tell a DOS from an Amstrad CPC. The game was also released with a supplementary board game, for some reason. Active from 2007 to 2009, Austar Gameworld was an interactive TV games channel by Australian company Austar, now known as Foxtel. For a fee of $13.90 dollary dues a month, users gained access to Channel 555, providing users with a variety of low-quality games. If you add 111 to the channel number, this would sound like an obvious creepypasta setup. Categories included Kids and Family, Brain Teaser Trivia, and Casino Sport. Austar were able to get the license of popular cartoons for some of these games, including Ben 10 and Scooby-Doo. In 2009, it was announced the channel would be shut down. Foxtel recognised how outdated these games and its distribution method was in the era of online gaming stores. Only 4 clips of these games have been found, with even less chance of game dumps being preserved. The early prototype of 2005 platform adventure game Chibi-Robo Plug Into Adventure was completely different to its final release. An IGN article from 2003 covers a game with a working title called Chibi-Robo, planned for release in mid-2003. At E3 of that year, a demo of this version of Chibi-Robo was made playable. Players would use an on-screen cursor to order around Chibi-Robo, with different cursor modes being used to move the robot towards or away from an object. Since the robot was sentient, it would react differently to different types of orders. Stern and fast decisions would react with quicker responses, while slow commands may be ignored. Basically, you get punished for being stupid, making this game terrible for me. The Chibi-Robo could also be upgraded with memory chips, improving battery life and learning ability. After E3 2003, Bandai put the project on indefinite hold. Nintendo picked up the project soon after, putting producer Kensuke Tanabe in charge. After he criticised the control style of the game, developer Skip Limited was asked to change the game into a third-person platform adventure, resulting in the legendary final product. Though footage exists of the E3 demo, no dump has been made public. Tiki Games announced a Kickstarter campaign for Chucky Wanna Play, a stealth action game based on the Chucky horror film franchise. You would have played as Chucky himself, hunting down and murdering random victims, usually in gory and creative ways. The developers already had the rights to publish the game, but required more funds to finish it, setting up a Kickstarter page. Of a goal of $925,000, only $585 was raised from 19 backers. Shocking that anonymous people would really be this unkeen to commit random acts of violence. In February 2023, a prototype of the game was found on an old Xbox 360 dev kit by Riley5411. The game was uploaded to the Internet Archive and is now available for anyone to play. Corpse Party Next Chapter was a mobile remake of the PC-98 RPG Maker survival horror game Corpse Party. An iconic game for anime fans, or otaku as they like to be called back then. In the game you play as a group of schoolchildren who have all been transported to a haunted house after performing a wholesome friendship ritual. The most gory and insane stuff you have ever witnessed then ensues. The mobile remake was released episodically on Famitsu's free game service from October 2006 to December 2007. 5 episodes were planned, but only 4 were released, with development being cancelled as developers Team Grizz had instead started working on an enhanced PC port called Corpse Party Blood Covered. A Nintendo DS port for Crash Tag Team Racing was planned alongside the Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube and PlayStation Portable versions of the game. The DS was not powerful enough for a direct port of the game, meaning a scaled down version of each model and racetrack must be made. With only 1 to 2 months of development needed before the game was finished, the DS port of Tag Team Racing was cancelled. This was because of the imminent release of Mario Kart DS, and the fear that it would take the market share of kart racer sales. Basically, Papa Mario made them brick themselves. The port was announced with the reveal of the game, but no footage was ever shown. In 2014, anonymous Crash fans leaked character models and levels of the game, this being the only publicly revealed images. At E3 2002, the sequel to Crimson Skies High Road to Revenge was shown to the public. Like the original, it was an arcade action flight game. The demo received a lukewarm response, being criticised for the slow and linear levels. The original intention of the game was to be a cinematic experience, almost like a playable movie. Players would have to be in certain places at certain times to catch a cinematic moment, forcing the level design to be extremely linear. The final game was changed to take into account the criticism from the public, releasing something that was much less linear. However, features such as mission selection were removed, giving the player less choice overall. Curly's Adventure was a point-and-click adventure game for the PC. You play as Curly, a man who looks like a Dobson character, who is trapped inside a mental asylum where patients are free to live out their fantasies. However, the asylum was run by a mad, evil scientist. Development started in 1995 for the MS-DOS, but was moved to Windows at the publisher's request. Not much else is known of the game, except it was cancelled in 1999. A demo was found on the game's old website, along with preview screenshots. In it, Curly has to escape from being tied up over a vat of acid. After he does so, you can interact with some of the asylum inmates, some of these being references to Star Wars and LucasArts characters. Dracula Hunter is a lost arcade game. Released in Japan in 1979, it was very popular, but failed to match the popularity when released abroad. Players control a character who flies around the screen, with the goal to protect a sleeping princess from vampires and bats by throwing a cross. Screenshots from the game have been found online through Japanese auction sites, as well as footage on YouTube. In 2018, a complete arcade cabinet was listed on the Yahoo Japan auction site. Though it is unknown who bought it, people with that kind of money aren't the charitable type to share ROMs online. The game is popular enough to have been referenced in the manga Game Center Arashi, and even received a fan-made sequel for the Sega Saturn called Dracula Buster. What was to be the first roguelike game for the Famicom, Dungeon Horoki, was announced in July 1988. Planned to be released in that very year, the game was delayed multiple times until it was eventually cancelled. You would have played as Mataro, a poor young man who joins a religious group on the promise of making him rich. His test for joining involves finding the Sephiroth tree on the 24th floor of the dungeon's basement. The game was featured in the thriller film Yojo Densetsu 88 to help promote the game. Despite the massive amounts of promotion materials and even ROMs used in the production of the film, it is yet to resurface. Emerald Island was an MMO launched in November 2008 and eventually closing down a year later. With a target audience of 6 to 12-year-olds, the game was similar to Club Penguin. The game was themed around the environment, with players having to save the island from Captain Blunderbore. You could grow plants and trees with the goal of keeping the island as green as possible, with players able to grow crops and earn in-game currency. The game was shut down after the developers, Fluid Entertainment, was sold off to another unknown company. Since the service was shut down, the game remains unplayable. The GameCube survival horror game Eternal Darkness was originally planned for the Nintendo 64. The story involved the return of an ancient tribe called the Ancients. Very original. 13 people from different time periods were all united with the goal of saving humanity by destroying the Ancients. The game was said to be one of the most impressive ever created for the Nintendo 64, capable of running at a higher resolution than most other games. When the game was being demoed, it was alleged that the N64 development kit being used was checked by Nintendo to make sure it was actually running on the original hardware. The game was being developed near the end of the N64's lifespan, and worries started to arise that the release of the new console would take attention away from the game. It was instead decided to move development to the GameCube. There are only slight differences between the two versions of the game, that is, other than the graphics. These being character changes such as with Joseph D. Mollet, a Templar Knight who originally had a more major role in the story. The second Formula 1 racing game, developed by Codemasters F1 2010, was the first they would release for the PC, PS3 and Xbox 360, with F1 2009 being released for the Wii and PSP. During the development of the game, Codemasters released development diaries to promote the game, providing first looks at the gameplay. Despite these games being based on the 2010 season of F1, the footage in the pre-alpha build videos contained cars from the competition from the year prior. These cars were all removed from the final release of F1 2010. Somehow this was enough to warrant a spot on this Iceberg and an article in the Lost Media Wiki, but I'm sure there's one person out there that might find this interesting. Facebook You Don't Know Jack was Facebook's version of Jack Games' long-running trivia game. At the time of creation, You Don't Know Jack was considered to be the most popular and irreverent trivia game. So of course Facebook had to get it on their website. The game was set up as a fictional television quiz show, with the twist being that you get bullied by the host whenever you get an answer wrong. The game was released on Facebook's website in May 2012, winning a Spike Video Game Award for the best social game in the same year. It was released alongside an iOS and Android version of the game, allowing crossplay between each version. It also made use of Facebook's friend system, where scores can be saved and shared with others. As was popular in the era, it also made use of many free-to-play game features, such as in-app purchases and being given limited numbers of plays. Facebook and freemium mobile games are the perfect evil duo. By 2015, the popularity of the game had declined, and Jackbox Games announced it would be shut down. Another reason for the closure was due to Facebook requiring apps to update to a new API, with Jackbox not having the time to commit to integrating Facebook to a game which was no longer popular. This version of the game is no longer available to play on any platform. Luckily, there is enough footage available online to aid with preservation. Released in 2002 in Japan, the sixth installment of the Fire Emblem franchise, Burning Blade, was the first to be released on a handheld console and marked a new start for the series, being a separate continuity from the first 5 games that came before it. The game started development as an N64 title, then known as Fire Emblem Maiden of Darkness. After 3 years of development and multiple delays, the game was shelved, with development restarting completely as a new title on the Game Boy Advance. Little is known about the original version of the game, with only a single screenshot, some concept art, and a script publicly available. During development of The Binding Blade, many pre-release builds were shown to the public, the first being a 2001 Famitsu article which showed 2 screenshots depicting a very early battle scene and a conversation between 2 characters. The second and most well-known early build was shown at Space World 2001. Though not much associated material has been saved from the event, it is the only build to have any surviving video footage, showing a game that is much closer to the final release. One of the most infamous changes from this build was through the design of Roy, the main character of the game. The original design featured a much more youthful and adventurous design, similar to a protagonist from a shonen manga. Though multiple more builds are rumoured to have existed, none have been publicly leaked. Gremlins, also known as Gremlins Revenge and Gremlins Stripe vs Gizmo, is an unreleased third-person shooter for the PS2 and GameCube. Yes, you did hear that right, a third-person shooter. It is based on the movie franchise of the same name and would act as a continuation of Gremlins 2. Set 20 years after the original film, the town of Kingston Hill is celebrating the anniversary of the defeat of the Gremlins when Gizmo gets splashed by water, starting the chaos again. The game was a squad-based shooter. Players could control Gizmo or the evil Stripe as they issue commands to Mogwai or Gremlins to assist in the battle. Special support squad members could be unlocked during the game, each providing unique attacks and abilities. 2 campaigns would be available depending on what character you chose. The game was split into a linear adventure story mode and a quick action mode, where any stage could be chosen, with 11 stages planned to be available. The game was first announced in April 2003, with release planned for the end of the year. Though no official reason was given for the cancellation, there are multiple theories. These being quality issues, lack of funding, or the game being shelved after the developer's LSP merged with Hip Games. Though no ROM has been dumped, multiple screenshots and cutscenes have been leaked online. Hatsune Miku Project Diva is a 2009 rhythm game for the PlayStation Portable. The series is famous for its star Hatsune Miku and use of a virtual voice synthesizer known as Vocaloid software to create its songs. The game was announced in 2008, known then as just Project Diva. In September of that year, a demo was leaked online, quickly being taken down by publisher Sega's Ninjas. Supposedly, this demo contained 5 songs, with the animations seemingly unfinished, being much choppier than those in the final game. There are also less customization options, with the ability to change the sprite of notes missing from this release. Later that year at the Tokyo Game Show, a preview of Project Diva was shown, this being more similar to the final release. The leaked demo went under the radar for many years, until 2014 when a ProjectDiva.net user, Stone, started a thread on the website about the alleged beta, asking if anyone had a link to it. Though no one had a link, one user claimed the demo was just a single video file showing preview footage. In late 2022, Lost Media Wiki user Sunny12557 started a search for the demo. By searching through old Japanese torrents, the leaked preview footage was uncovered, but nothing on the playable demo. Around halfway through the video now, I just wanted to say thank you for anyone watching. If you're enjoying it, please leave a like, since this lets me know what kind of videos people like to see, plus it supports the channel. Also maybe leave a comment if you have any feedback or suggestions for stuff you'd like to see. Sorry for the quick interruption, back to the video. Hot Wheels Velocity X is a racing game released in 2002 for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, PC, and Game Boy Advance. It is unsurprisingly based off of the Hot Wheels toy line. A pre-release version of the game was shown to IGN by publishers THQ, with the hope of some sweet publicity. This beta is much different from the final release, and luckily for us, video footage of the game was so graciously provided online by IGN, allowing for me to list off the changes in bullet points. When a stunt is performed, it says, "You've been Darylized." Not shocked to see this was changed. The HUD was also different, with a red arrow pointing the player in the correct direction instead of the blue or yellow arrow in the final version. There is also a completely different soundtrack. Rushing through the other minor differences for completionist's sake include minor level changes, a cut voiceover on the startup screen, and a cut stunt mode, and 3 cut cars. Shortly after release, developers Beyond Games posted a web series going behind the scenes on the development of the game. 5 videos were created, and after the original site was taken down, only 4 have been archived, with only B-roll of the 5th being publicly available. A third-person action horror shooter based on the Jurassic Park franchise was in development by developers Savage Entertainment, planned for release in 2001 for the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. Known as Jurassic Park Survival, it would have been one of many planned Jurassic Park-themed games released by Konami and Vivendi Games, with both publishers looking to capitalize on the then upcoming release of Jurassic Park 3. Originally the game was to be a direct adaptation of the film, however it was reworked into an original game after everyone realized just how bad Jurassic Park 3 was. The plot was pretty simple. You play as a security officer at Jurassic Park who has to rescue fellow security officers and prevent the dinosaurs from leaving the island after yet another dinosaur outbreak has occurred. The developers attempted to blend elements from action and survival horror games, inspired by both Tomb Raider and Dino Crisis, also adding in stealth mechanics because too many ideas has never ruined a game before. Players could make use of the environment, climbing trees, hanging onto ledges, and swimming, using these mechanics to survive despite a limited arsenal of weaponry. There would also be a bullet time mechanic similar to Max Payne. There would also be puzzle mechanics, including hacking terminals. Developers also planned driving segments, with one notable set piece being a T-Rex escape. Since this was a Jurassic Park game, many notable dinosaurs would appear, including a Velociraptor, Triceratops, Dilophosaurus, Compsognathus, I'm going to leave that one to sit for a while, and the Spinosaurus. This game sounds like an absolute mess, so it's no wonder that the producers at Universal Interactive cancelled the game after they were not satisfied with its quality. Though they made attempts to complete the game with different developers, the game was never released. Interestingly, around the release of Jurassic World in 2015, a game called Jurassic World Survivor started development. The game was ultimately shelved before it was even announced, with only leaked animation tests and screenshots acting as proof of its existence. This officially confirming the Survivor tagline as being cursed for the Jurassic Park franchise. Kid Kirby was being developed in the 1990s by Scottish developer DMA Design Limited. In the game, you would play as an infant Kirby, with an iconic pink curl. The player would use the SNES mouse to drag and launch Kirby around levels, with gameplay being compared to Angry Birds. Alongside the Kid Kirby would also be a younger King Dedede. After years of slow development and the fact that no one owned an SNES mouse, the game was cancelled. Kid Kirby has not resurfaced online, however many sprites and game assets have shown up. Developers DMA Design Limited luckily managed to get over this disappointment, in the future changing their name to Rockstar North and developing iconic vaporware game, Agent. Another Kirby entry, this time being a sequel to the Game Boy Color's Kirby Tilt and Tumble. This time being developed for the GameCube, TNT 2 was announced in 2001 and would have been controlled entirely by Game Boy Advance, which was connected to the GameCube through a link cable, acting as a motion sensor. The game would have played similarly to the original, with Kirby having to navigate an obstacle course. There was also a cute feature where Kirby would appear on the Game Boy screen after falling from a stage, when King Dedede would then launch him back up. The next year the game was shown again, except all mention of Kirby was removed, with him being replaced by generic shapes and the game renamed as Roll-O-Rama. Though there was no official announcement for the cancellation, Roll-O-Rama was never released, hinting that it was indeed cancelled. One of the reasons why was probably because of how convoluted it was to set up. Players would need, at the minimum, a GameCube, a Game Boy Advance, the game disc, a Game Boy Advance cart with motion sensor detection, and a GameCube to GBA link cable. Only spoiled rich kids, or either grown adult Kirby fans, would be able to enjoy this game. The game only exists through video footage with no leak being made public. In 2022, a spiritual successor of sorts arrived as Kirby's Dream Buffet, allowing players once again the chance to roll around as the pink puffball. A promotional Flash game released to promote a PS3 game, this being 2008's The Last Guy. Just the mention of the word Flash game hints at the inevitable fate for The Last Guy everywhere. The game was a simplified version of the PS3 release, with players able to input a website to be turned into a stage. This would then generate a map based on the website, with images being turned into houses or citizens. Players would have to rescue these survivors from enemy zombies and help to relocate them to an escape zone. The Last Guy Everywhere had some cool features. Most notable was the globally ranked leaderboard and a blog widget where some sites could activate the game's function, instantly making the game playable on their site. More impressively was that the game was only made by 5 people. It won multiple awards over its short lifespan, including a Japan Internet Creative Award for 2009. Archives from the Wayback Machine show the game was last active in February 2010. Since the shutdown of Flash in recent years, it means the game would be impossible to play. A launch title for the Nintendo GameCube, Luigi's Mansion is a spin-off of the Mario franchise, where you play as Luigi inside a mansion. First revealed during Nintendo Space World 2000 through a tech demo, this early version features several differences from the final game. The Poltergust 3000, Luigi's weapon of choice against the ghosts he encounters in the mansion, has minor design differences, appearing more rectangular and blocky whilst sporting 4 wheels and a meter. This was the overheat meter. When full, it would cause the machine to stop working and Luigi to fall over, a mechanic which was cut from the final game. The Game Boy Horror, which acts as a HUD, now contains a timer. This was probably used specifically for the demo to allow for players to know how much time was left. Other differences include the mansion's layout, removed ghost designs, and a slightly different designed disc. Making the game was a codename of a cancelled game for the Game Boy Color, developed by a group called Savage Pixel and produced by IGN editor Craig Harris. The game's purpose was for Harris to document the development of a game over several articles. The first article was released in September 2000, where author Harris would describe his idea of building a Game Boy Color game from scratch. The game would revolve around giant monsters rampaging around a city, destroying everything in their path. The 3 playable characters first announced included a giant raccoon, giant bunny rabbit, and a giant wolf. Readers could get involved with the development of the game by sending in name suggestions for these characters. A rough demo of the game was created, alongside sprites, animations, and concept art. The game was even rumoured to be far into development. That was until March of 2001, when it was announced the game was cancelled and no further making-of articles would be written. This was because of the lack of budget for the game, as well as lack of interest in Game Boy Color games at the time. Craig Harris had also discovered, like many of us before and since, that making games was hard, and it would just be much easier to write about them instead. The scale of the project was downgraded to a minigame version that would then be released online. In 2018, Craig Harris revealed he had acquired the ROM, source code, and assets for the game. However, he said it was unlikely it would ever be released online. Mead Girls DS would have been a tie-in game for the 2004 teen comedy film also called Mean Girls. The game was planned to be released in Europe in September 2009 and in the United States in early 2010, both being over 4 years from the film's release. However, both of these games were cancelled very close to their planned release. Little is known about the gameplay, with different information being provided from conflicting sources. Some say it was a simple puzzle game, ripping off other similar DS games. The ESRB listing says it was a text-based adventure game. All we know for a fact is that it would have been very annoying. The game cover notably didn't feature star of the film Lindsay Lohan. People speculated that this was due to financial reasons, and others because she had gained a poor reputation during the 4 years after the film was released. Though the game was cancelled, there is evidence that it was sold at least once, and if the game was floating out there in the wild, it was possible to find. And found the game was, by YouTube user Ray Mona, who uploaded a whole documentary going over the saga for how the ROM was found, and uploaded a full walkthrough on their channel, making this game a found media. First announced at PAX 2010 for release in 2011, Mega Man Universe was a 2D platformer like all the good Mega Man games, and like some of the bad ones. Planned for release on the PSN and Xbox Live Arcade, the game would play similarly to the classic Mega Man 2, and would feature a stage editor, allowing for users to create and share custom levels. The game also featured multiple playable characters, including Rockman, the Japanese version of Mega Man, and the bad box art Mega Man, a joke character based on early Mega Man box art. The player character could then be customized, grafting on body parts taken from enemies and bosses. In March of 2001, Capcom announced the game was cancelled, with their official reason being various circumstances, as opposed to games cancelled due to no circumstances. There is speculation that the game was cancelled due to negative feedback to the game's demo and general art style. with Capcom America's vice president later that year confirming they weren't happy with the quality of the game. Monster Chronicle 2 Mysterious Mecha Empire was a sequel to Monster Chronicle, released internationally as Crystal Monsters. The original game was released on mobile devices in Japan in 2008, with a DSi port created and released internationally 2 years later. Unsurprisingly from the name, Crystal Monsters was a creature collection game, where the protagonist goes through a quest to become the greatest monster breeder. It features real-time battles where players could fight against other players through their mobile phones. Monsters were obtainable through eggs found whilst playing. Its sequel, Monster Chronicle 2 Mysterious Mecha Empire, was only ever released in Japan. Exclusive to the 3 mobile services iMobile, EasyWeb and Yahoo Keitai, it would have cost players 315 yen a month to play. An associated site called Monster Chronicle Online existed, allowing players to purchase items using points obtained while playing. It's unknown when the game officially shut down, though new quests were being added up until 2010. No gameplay footage has surfaced online, though promotional images from the game have survived the shutdown of the official site. From these images alone, it is pretty easy to dismiss the game as nothing more than a low-budget Pokemon clone, something I'm not going to do because I do like this little fella. After the release of Myst and its sequel Riven, the sequel to Myst, developer Cyan did not have another sequel to Riven, the sequel to Myst in them. However, they were approached by the developers at Presto Studio, who impressed Cyan with their pitch and were given permission to make Myst 3. The development of Myst 4 was also outsourced, this time to Dreamforge Entertainment, the developer behind Sanitarium. According to a former Ubisoft developer, the title for Myst 4 would have been Myst 4 Adventure Beyond the Dini Ultraworld. After the release of Myst 3, the rights for the Myst franchise was purchased by Ubisoft. They decided to cancel the development of Myst 4, which was currently at 20% complete after 2 years of development, and to make their own Myst 4 from scratch, this being Myst 4 Revelation. The game would have used real-time rendering instead of the pre-rendered graphics all 3 originals had used. The game would also have taken place on 4 different islands, one of which, Cascade, focusing on water puzzles, and another taking place on an icy landscape. Most of the information for this game has been found through portfolios and resumes of former developers, with video footage, screenshots, and art being provided by some of those who were involved. My goat, Nancy Drew, was planning to release another title in the Nancy Drew Dossier series, a hidden object PC game series unlike the usual Nancy Drew games, which were mystery adventures. Ship of Shadows was to be released in 2010, 1 year after it was teased at the end of the previous game in the series, Resorting to Danger. Nancy would have been invited to spend a few nights on board a newly renovated cruise line when she discovered the ship is actually haunted. When 2010 came and went with no release, it was announced in developer Her Interactive's community forum that it was delayed to make the game, quote, the best the series had to offer. The Nancy Drew Dossier series was considered as less of a priority compared to the original adventure games, so further development was delayed as priority was made on developing the new mobile series. In 2011 it was confirmed that there were no plans to continue work on the game. Only the game's cover and some concept art has been revealed online. Dead Space No Known Survivors was a flash game released to promote the first game in the series. It was a point-and-click adventure game consisting of 9 parts, each with a unique art style. The story involved 2 characters, each given 4 parts to cover their story, with the 5th part acting as an intermission. Each story involves the main character trapped in a room, where players could click on objects around the room to learn more about the situation, and with each click you would be sure to regret ever being curious. The first story involved George Greggs barricading himself in the room to prevent a necromorph from breaking in. He is caressing the fingers of his deceased girlfriend. These fingers become necromorphs and kill George. The game was developed by Deep Focus, with episodes releasing from August 2008 to October 2008. The game was hosted on NoKnownSurvivors.com a website which was shut down in 2012 and sold to a Japanese company. How very poetic. Pokemon Crystal version was the enhanced version of Pokemon Gold and Silver, released for the Game Boy Color in Japan in 2000. In Japan existed a gadget called the Mobile Adapter GB. It could be used to allow communication between a Game Boy Color and a mobile device, allowing internet connectivity for the console. Using this device connected to Pokemon Crystal, and after paying the monthly 100 yen fee, users could battle and trade with others over the internet and access minigames. Downloadable content was also made available, including the infamous GS Ball. The mobile service was shut down in December 2002 due to a lack of popularity, cutting off access to all content for users who had previously used it. The data was stored in the game's RAM, which was backed up by the console's battery. The battery in Pokemon games tended to drain quickly since they were constantly in use for tracking the time for the in-game clock, even when the game wasn't being played. Since all the cartridges have drained batteries, it's impossible to access the mobile adapter content. And this mobile adapter was never released outside of Japan. This was because all Westerners were considered plebs with less advanced technology than the Japanese. A mobile spin-off of puzzle adventure series Professor Layton, Mansion of the Deathly Mirror, was developed for iMode flip phone services, a Japanese online service for downloading games for flip phones. The game was released in October 2008 and was available for people who subscribed to the Spongebob Town service. The plot involved Layton and his twink partner being summoned to a mysterious place and having to solve some mysterious plot, this time surrounding a deathly mirror that allows users to speak with the dead. The game was essentially a port of the DS titles, featuring the same puzzles from those games, but altered to work on a flip phone. 1 year later, in 2009, the game was re-released as Professor Layton and the Mansion of the Deathly Mirror Remix, this time featuring completely original puzzles. When the shutdown of these mobile services, the game was no longer available to download, with only low-quality footage available as proof of its existence. I think Xbox platformer is a phrase that doesn't get mentioned much, but after Microsoft bought Rare, it was hoped that people would hear it more often. When Rare was bought by Microsoft, many of its current projects involved Nintendo's characters, so had to be completely overhauled, reworked, or even cancelled. One of these projects that Rare didn't want to give up was Donkey Kong Racing. Rare decided to dip back into their original series to see what they could use to overhaul the game, and one that popped up was Sabrewulf. By mixing Sabrewulf and Donkey Kong Racing, they would create Sabreman Stampede. The title was trademarked in June of 2003, leading to speculation of an official release by the end of the year. When that came and went with no official announcement, there was worry. On the Fat Babies forum, a Rare developer was asked about the future of Donkey Kong Racing. They replied that the game was still being developed, but was completely different to the game originally planned for the GameCube. Originally the game was just a reskin of DK Racing, with Sabrewulf characters jumping between animals while racing to the finish line, but the Xbox higher-ups thought the design was too old-fashioned and pushed the devs towards making something more modern. The game design ended up being essentially Grand Theft Auto with animals. Sabreman and his wife Flo would explore an island, doing quests for villagers and riding around on animals. A minigame was added whenever the player would attempt to ride an animal, essentially taming them. This caused a debate within the team who wanted to avoid making an animal cruelty simulator. The team also had more disagreements with Microsoft, as Rare wanted a cartoony art style and Microsoft wanted something more realistic. It's no surprise then to hear that game development slowed down, since the team was no longer motivated to work on a project that was constantly being changed by the higher-ups. And as the years went by, the development was quietly cancelled, with no official announcement. Infinite Machine, a group of former LucasArts developers, started work on a sequel to 1993's Sam & Max Hit the Road. With development starting in 2001, it was to be called Sam & Max Plunge Through Space. What kind of quirky hijinks would Sam and his little buddy Max get up to on this adventure? Well, the team wrote a script around the idea of recovering a stolen Statue of Liberty, which had been left in another galaxy and had since been transformed into a space casino. Since the game was to be developed for the Xbox, the team would take advantage of the system and decide to ignore the sprite-based original and make the game in fully 3D. Though still retaining the point-and-click style, it would also take inspiration from platformers. Players could control Sam directly and explore the environment. The essential pitch was to make a platformer minus the jumping puzzles with more character and adventure. After 1 year of development, Infinite Machine went bankrupt and cancelled the project. Only concept art of the game has been made publicly available, with no footage or beta images. After the cancellation, LucasArts bought the rights to Sam & Max and started development on their own sequel, Freelance Police, a game which too was cancelled. Scribblenauts Fighting Words was planned to be the iOS adaptation of the game Scribblenauts. In the game, players could create anything by typing a word, using this freedom to solve puzzles. The iOS version of Scribblenauts was planned to be free to play, being more simple and refined than the original, more of an arcade-style game. Development started in 2014 and was cancelled 2 years later. A public beta was announced and was accepting sign-ups just before Scribblenauts Fighting Words was cancelled, suggesting development was close to finishing. No official reason was given why. There is an ongoing search for the beta. Some users had been sent a download code for it, meaning there is a slight chance of a Scribblenauts Fighting Words beta existing in the wild. The game has survived through screenshots provided by Twitter user Lydia's Whispers. The Simpsons Game was a game about Mr. Simpsons and his silly family. It was a platformer game released in 2007 for multiple platforms. Featuring an original story from Simpsons writers and taking a slightly referential tone, the game was released around the same time of the Simpsons movie. Though obviously looking to profit from it, the two are separate. Developed by EA Redwood Shores, the studio planned to make a sequel to the original game. However, it was never officially announced or put into full development. The only evidence for the existence of the sequel was through the LinkedIn page of a former EA employee who was listed as working on the Simpsons 2 prototype. Though this doesn't confirm the existence of the game, it does show the willingness for the developers to make it, or at least propose it. Another sequel, this time being just slightly further in development. The credits for action-adventure game Split Second ended with a "to be continued," showing a sequel was planned for development. However, soon after Split Second was released, the developer Black Rock Studios had received new management, and as most places that get new management, they messed everything up. This time by cutting most of the working staff and cancelling all projects in development. The studio shut down a year later. Some footage of the game is known to exist alongside concept art and screenshots. Spongebob Town is probably the worst name for a video game, since everyone who would be interested in playing probably knows the name of SpongeBob's Town. Also known as SpongeBob SquarePants Online, slightly generic but better, the game would have been an MMO based on the SpongeBob franchise. Like most children's MMOs, it took heavy inspiration from Club Penguin. Players could explore Bikini Bottom, living in this virtual world and interacting with other online players. There was also a heavy emphasis on racing. Players were able to customize their car and compete in racing minigames. Blue Art Global started development in 2011, with an open technical test running in October of 2012. From the test, it was clear Spongebob Town was almost finished and ready for release in 2013. However, it was abruptly cancelled with no official statement from anyone involved. Especially strange since a second technical test was being planned for later 2012. Spongebob Town has not been seen since October 2012. However, since it hosted an online beta, lots of footage exists as well as promotional material. An ongoing search is active for the game. Finishing with another Nickelodeon game, Tales of Neopia, aka World of Neopia, was a planned virtual world game based on the Neopets franchise. The game was officially announced in 2008, but was cancelled in 2010 after little to no updates from the game. The reason behind the cancellation was because of Viacom, owner of the rights to Neopets, shutting down multiple development projects related to the franchise. Little is known about Tales of Neopia, but from screenshots it can be presumed that the game had more of a focus on action and adventure than compared to the original Neopets Virtual Simulator. So that concludes the first layer of the ultimate lost video games iceberg. If you made it this far into the video and enjoyed it, please leave a like to let me know you like this kind of video, and also comment any suggestions and stuff you'd like to see. All of that would be much appreciated. Subscribe for more videos, since I will be working on further similar stuff, including a sequel to this one. Thank you for watching.